Yep. Have just connected the SQL Server, and when we create a new database, the two files will get created. Those are, I have said it's a minimum, but we can still have a third, four, five files also. So the basically MDF file will hold the actual data of the database, and the LDF file will record the ongoing information. When a user or when I run a query to update or to insert the data in the database, the first thing what happens is the new rows which I'm trying to insert the database, those new rows will be inserted in LDF file for the first time, and once the transaction being completed successfully, the data from the LDF file will be moved to the MDF file. This is how the transaction happens on SQL Server. I repeat it again. When a user executes a query to insert some rows in a table, those new rows first they get inserted in the LDF file, and once the transaction commits successfully, the data in the LDF file will be flushed or will be moved to MDF file. And again, the process of moving the data from LDF file onto the MDF file will be taken care by the SQL itself. We don't need to do any manual thing. SQL Server itself runs checkpoint. The keyword is a checkpoint. SQL Server itself runs checkpoints for every 60 seconds, and that checkpoints, what it does is it will try to check all the data in the LDF file, and whatever the data that is committed, that data will be flushed from LDF file onto the MDF file. So this is the usually that happens at backend. And let's assume the user's transaction, or a user is inserting some 10 million rows in a table, and as per my explanation, those 10 million rows first gets inserted in the LDF file and then after MDF file. And assume the user query has inserted around 10,000 rows, and then after, due to some issues, the transaction got failed or the user query got failed. Then as the SQL Server behaves ACID properties. As the SQL Server has got ACID properties, what it does is when a transaction fails, whatever the rows that were inserted till now will be rolled back. So in our case, the user is trying to insert 10 million rows in a table, but after inserting a 10,000 rows, if the transaction fails, those 10,000 rows will be removed from the LDF file. This is how the SQL maintains the data consistency. And apart from these MDF and LDF, we do have another file which we call as .ndf. So the first we know about these two files, .mdf and .ndf, and it's .ldf, and apart from these two we can have another file which is .ndf. And what is the requirement, and when do we go for .ndf? And this .ndf, the abbreviation is either you can call it as next data file, or some of the people will call it as secondary data file. So what is the requirement? When do we go for .ndf? The case is, let's say you have created a database test and you hosted .mdf file on M drive, let's assume, and then .ldf file on L drive. This is the initial setup what you have done with the test database. Now later on, the data is getting continuously loaded onto this database, and you notice that the M drive is running out of space. So as users are using this database to load more and more data, at one point this drive is running out of space. So at this point, what we do is, as the MDF file is running out of space on the drive, what happens? When a user comes and if he tries to insert new data, the transaction will get failed. It is because there is no more space so to expand the MDF file. The user transaction will get failed, and at some point the database might go into recovery pending. There are some chances. So to avoid this, once you get to know that my drive is running out of space, the next thing, you can add a new file to the database that is called the NDF file. You can add the new NDF file and keep it on a different drive, maybe N drive. You may think that, okay, if my M drive is running out of space, can't I get my storage team to add more space on the drive? Yes, it is possible. But I'm talking that in a way where you don't have any option to either expand the M drive or adding more storage to the M drive. If that is not the possible case, then the only thing you can do is add new NDF file onto a different drive where you have more space, and from then onwards, whatever the new data coming onto your database, you can divert those new data or new tables onto the N drive data file. And this is the one of the reason why we go for an NDF file. The reason is to avoid space issues. And the other reason is for better performance. I hope you got the reason why we go for NDF file. And one of the reason is space. But the other reason I'm saying is the performance. The simple example I give you, if I share a notepad file, if I keep a notepad file on your C drive and I ask all the 10 people to browse that notepad file, and we obviously see that the notepad file either it get locked or blocked. Even if it responds, it would be very slow because all the 10 people are accessing the same file on same drive. So instead of that, I can copy that file onto a different drive and I can ask you to browse half of them onto C drive and half of them onto D drive. So there you can get a better performance because you are distributing the load on the drives. So in the same way, instead of keeping all the tables data in one MDF file in one drive, what we can do is we can distribute the tables across two files, maybe 10 tables in MDF file and other 10 tables in .ndf file, and these two files are on different drives. Then people who are accessing a tables that resides on NDF file will get a better performance, And the same way, the people who are accessing the tables that resides on MDF file will have a better performance because both the requests are going across the drives, so there will be a better I/O. So that is one of the reason why we go for NDF file. Any questions about the NDF file? A good question from Venkat. How to know that MDF file or the drive where we keep the MDF files? It's not only very specific to MDF files. We also need to check our LDF file drives as well. But ultimately, how do we know the drive is running out of space? It is with the help of alerts. It is with the help of alerts that are configured to trigger an email to the DBA team in case of low disk space. If you have got 1 or 2 servers to work on, then maybe probably every day when you log on onto the server, we check the space on the drives. But if you are managing some hundreds of the servers in your organization, then probably we need to have monitoring tools. That monitoring tool will alert you whenever the drive space less than 15% or less than 20%. So it depends upon the organization to organization. So in my organization, it's something like we have some hundreds of servers. So whenever the free space on the drive falls below 15%, the tool, the monitoring tool, which is a ADR Diagnostic Manager, it gonna send an email to the DBA team. So once we get an alert, then we jump onto the server and we check why the space was filling up. And we act accordingly. If there is a possibility of adding more space on the drive, we add it. Or else we try to look forward for creating the files. Yes, Venkat, we do set the percentage to get alert. If you want to have an alert, if the free space falls below 15%, then you can set it. We learn more when we talk about the alerts and notifications. I will show you in a second how to create the NDF file. So in order to create the NDF file, as of now, you know that have a sample DB, and this sample DB has got two files. One is MDF and the other is LDF. This is a MDF and this is a LDF. So before I go and create the NDF file, let us try to make ourselves comfortable with the options listing out here. So the first column is a logical names. What are the file names we are talking till now about? Those are physical files. .mdf files and .ldf files, those are physically present on the drives. But these are logical names that really required for the SQL to identify your database. So these are the logical names of the database files, and then this is a file type. The rows data indicates that is either .mdf file or .ndf file, where the data really host. And the second is the log, the file type log. It is for LDF file. And then the third column is about the file group. As it sounds, we can group set of files. Assume I have a very complex and large database where I got one MDF and one LDF. That is mandatory. And apart from this, I have got 10 NDF files. I have got 10 NDF files. And in those 10 NDF files, I am storing the data in such a way that all the students information will be stored in one data file, that is in one NDF file, and all the employees information in second NDF file, and all the maybe orders information on the third NDF file. So it's nothing but just I'm grouping. I'm trying to make I'm trying to keep the similar data in one file. So to make that way, we have to create a file group. So in order to create a file group, you can see on left hand side we have a file groups. You can just click on it, and by default we'll be having only one file group, and that is a primary file group where the MDF file resides on it. So if you want to create a new NDF file on and use it on a different drive, the first thing we need to create a file group so that we can ask the SQL Server to move the table whenever you create a new one. When you create a new table, how do you define that the table should either go onto the MDF file or NDF file? It can be done with the help of file groups. So in order to create a new file group, in this window you see an add button. You can just click on add and just give the name for the NDF file. That is a name for the file group. So I just give it as a secondary, and the second column is the files. How many files you want to group in this file group. So as of now, I haven't created any new file, so I leave it at 0, and the next column is read only. If you click this read only option, then your file group will become read only. And I don't think you really need this option at this moment, but in complex environments and situations we make it read only. But I will explain this when we are in topic of backups and restores, but now it's not required. And the next and the last one is a default. You can see now the primary file group is set as default. What it indicates? It indicates when I create a new table, by default that table will be created in primary file group. So when I say primary file group, if you go back here, the primary file group is this one. That means it gets created on this MDF file. But the situation is the drive is running out of space. The drive where this MDF file exists is running out of space. So I don't want to create any new tables on this MDF file. So in that case, as we have already created a secondary file group, now in this place you see a add button. Just click on add and provide a new logical name, what you want to call it. So I say sample new file. And then after, you can see the row types, it automatically picks up row data saying that this is a data file. It might be a master data file or a new data file, but ultimately it is a data file. And then after, the file group, you can click on the drop down and you can select the secondary file group. By selecting the secondary file group, what it indicates is we are matching the NDF file in secondary file group. So when we create a new table, we can define that, okay, this table should be created in secondary file group. We can write a syntax while we create a table. At bottom, we can give on which file group this table should go. So I will show you in a second. So I'm mapping this new file in secondary file group, and I would change. Can we give the same name for NDF file as an LDF file? If it is a logical name, no. The name should be different. So I would like to change the path because I don't want to keep the NDF file on C drive. So I select it as a D drive. Yes, obviously you can give it because somewhere you are distinguish with the extensions. You can have two files with the same name for NDF and NDF, but it doesn't really make sense. Uh, you need to understand by looking at the file names what the file name it got. So I can still go for sample db underscore NDF, but it doesn't make sense. If you jump onto your server, most of the times the extensions will not be shown. The file extensions will be automatically hidden. So in that case, it makes you confuse whether this is a MDF file or NDF file until you look at the description of the column of that file. So it is always good to make yourself life easy so that it's sample db new, then it's NDF. So once you define this way, you can just click on OK. So now for this file, we have got three files, one MDF, LDF, and the third is the NDF. So you can go and check the file on D drive now. You can see a new NDF file has been created. Now how should I move the new table onto an NDF file? One way is, if you go to the properties of this database and then file groups, we have an option called default. When the primary set is default, then whenever a user creates a table, I'm just writing a sample table script. Okay, I'm creating a table which is tbl underscore test with one column, that is ID, with an integer value. If I execute the script now, it gonna create on my primary file group by default. It is because primary file group is set for default, so this table will be created in my primary file group. But what if you want to get this newly created table into secondary instead of primary? So there are two options. One is either you can make your secondary file group as default, or what you can do is at the end you can just provide the file group name. At the end of the line for a table script, you can clearly specify that this table should be created on the secondary file group. You can execute this. I just renamed this table, so a new table is getting created on my secondary file group. So under sample DB, we now have two tables. The first table resides on primary file group and the second table resides on secondary file group. So any questions about the file groups? The advantages of having the file groups, better we know or we feel it when we actually discuss about the backups and restores. But for now, it is required to overcome the space issues and to get a better performance. Until now, we came to a position that the data will be stored in MDF and LDF files. Okay, now we go a bit in depth. Inside the MDF and LDF files, how the table data will be stored. Inside the MDF, LDF or NDF files, how the data will be stored. The answer is the data will be stored in the form of pages. So now I have created a new table. So some space in that MDF file will be allocated for this table. When I say some space, it's nothing but the page. So the data in the files will be stored in the form of pages, and each page will be of size 8 KB. I see a question. If we set default for primary, also, does it take secondary if there is no space in primary? No. That's what I'm saying. Unless you specify on secondary. If you don't specify on secondary, whatever the file group is set as default, the tables will be created in that file group. And if you don't have free space on the drive, then your transaction will get failed. That's it. And I see a question from Navnita. Navnita, I request you to, if you have any questions, please ping it openly so that everyone can look at your question. I see data automatically moves into NDF once MDF is full, right? No, SQL doesn't do that. SQL doesn't do in a way of moving the data automatically if one of the drive is full. It doesn't work that way. So the data inside the MDF file or NDF file will be stored in the form of pages. And we have created a new table. So it requires some space to store in the MDF file. So a page or 2 pages will be allocated this table. And when we start writing the data or when we start inserting the rows in this table, then at backend, the data will be written in the pages. When I say pages, it is almost same as our notebook pages. How we start writing on the notebook pages, the same way SQL will also start writing the data in the form of pages in your files. And each page will be of size 8 KB. So whenever the page get filled off, that is whenever it reaches 8 KB, then SQL will provide a new page to that table. And each page at top will have a header information. And that header information will have the information something like for which table this page belongs to and what data this page contains. Let's say I have created a students table and have started inserting the data of the students IDs starting from 1 to 100. I'm inserting 100 student records in a students table. Then when I start executing the query, the SQL at backend, it keep on writes the information on the pages and assume that the first page has accumulated around 20 records of that student page. Then after, it takes a new page from the SQL and it starts writing the data from the second page from row number 21. It keeps on right until your rows get finished off. And for each and every page, at this moment, my table has used around 4 to 5 pages. So the table got split into 4 to 5 pages, and all these 4 to 5 pages at top will have a space that is reserved for header, and it keeps on it makes a record that this page belongs to so and so table. So there should be a mechanism right inside the data files, or else we'll have some hundreds of tables in the database, and those hundreds of tables data will be written on to some thousands of pages. So when once the insert being done, as a user, when I try to read the data from the database, how SQL Server knows that, okay, this table data is stored in so and so page number. So to avoid all these things, SQL Server on each and every page, it stores the header information with which table this page belongs to, so that when a user executes a query to pull out the data from a students, then SQL Server will directly jump onto that specific page with the help of header information. And each page is a limit of having a size of 8 KB, and the collection of 8 pages is called as extent. The collection of 8 pages is called as extent, which is of size would be 64 KB. So each page is of size 8 KB, and the collection of 8 pages we call it as extent, and the size would be 64 KB. So whenever SQL release this page, whenever the OS release this page to the SQL, internally SQL Server will get it as extent, and it would be of 64 KB, and that extent will have 6 pages in it. And here we have got two types of extents. One is uniformed extent, and the other is mixed extent. You can just map, I can say in non-technical terms, extent I can say is a small book with 8 pages. Okay. So uniform extent is nothing but all the pages inside this extent. We know that extent holds 8 pages, right? So all these 8 pages used by single table, we call it as a uniform extent. And what the mixed extent? The 8 pages in this extents are used by multiple tables. Let's say I have an extent with 8 pages and have created a table with couple of rows. Then I'm using 1 or 2 pages in that extent. After that, if another user is trying to create another tiny table, then the next set 2 pages will be used. In the same way, there's another user, he's trying to create one more tiny table, and again it uses 3 or 4 pages. So ultimately, in single extent which contains 8 pages is used by 3 different tables. So then we call it as a mixed extent. Mixed extent is nothing but the extent used by different objects. Uniform extent is the extent used by single object. Is it clear for everyone what a extent is, and what a uniform extent, and what a mixed extent? Yeah. Okay. This is for a service pack upgrade which was pending in our last class. So let me quickly take you through that. Once we install the base version, it is recommended to apply the latest service packs on those SQL Server. So yesterday there we have to hold it because it was giving me an error saying that you have to restart your machine. So have done it quickly before we started today's class. So you can see the restart computer is also passed. So once you can see everything is passed, now you can go on to next, and then you need to accept the license terms. And you can see the list of instances for which you want to apply service packs. Let's assume you have got 4 instances running on this machine. You can still apply service pack to all 4 instances at one point. As of now, I have got only one instance running on this machine, so it's giving only one instance. If I had installed 2 or 3 instances, then it would have listed out at the bottom, and I can just select those 2 or 3 instances here, and I can apply the service pack in one go. And if you don't want to have, maybe probably your requirement is apply the service pack only on one instance and don't apply on other instances, then you can just uncheck the other 2 instances here and go further. It's pretty much simple, the service pack upgradation. And this is the way we usually do on standalone servers. But for in clustered servers, the process would be different. But before we discuss more about these applying the service packs and cluster, we need to know what a cluster means. So I will hold until we discuss a topic of clustering. So this is a place where it checks the files in use. It says the management studio is open and it need to be closed before this service pack been applied. So it clearly says the ssms.exe process is not controlled by the update wizard. You have to manually stop this process to avoid a computer restart. It's not a showstopper for you. You can still go with next, but the only thing is you need to restart your machine once you apply service pack. So I don't want to restart the machine again when we are on class. So there's a question from Venkat. Is the latest service pack includes all the previous SPs? Yes. If you remember, if you notice here on top, it's SQL Server 2012 Service Pack 2. That is, I am applying Service Pack 2. So what it holds is all the fixes and everything from the Service Pack 1 as well. So you don't need to apply Service Pack 1 and then come on to Service Pack 2. It's not required. You can always jump and apply the latest service pack. If I had service pack 3 or 4 for this version, then I would have applied the 4 or 3, which is the latest one. So let me close the management studio before we go with the service pack. You can exit it. If you want, you can save the queries, or else you can just click on no. Now refresh the check, and it still says the process is running. It could be probably at backend the management studio application is up and running. Let me do, yeah, it's somewhere getting open. I'm not sure how it got open. So let me do a refresh again. Right. So I don't have any other applications that is holding for this service pack. So now I can go with the next, and you directly came to a summary now. if you just compare the things, we haven't provided any of our inputs. It's pretty straightforward for applying a service pack. Now you can just click on update, and that's it. Your service pack update is in process. And one more thing, when we do a service packs, it is always good to take the backups of all your databases. Don't bother about how to take a backup now. We'll learn more about the backups and restore in our next class. But as a rule, remember that before you apply service packs, not only service pack, but what are the changes, the major changes on your system, before you do that, it is always best to take a backups of your database. It is because once you apply service pack, most of the things will get changed. All the binaries will be updated. Maybe there is a chance some applications which are working before might not work after applying the service pack. Or the users might not feel comfortable after applying the service pack. There are some scenarios, even you are doing a good thing of applying the service pack as per the Microsoft recommendations, but there is still some possibility where the application doesn't like it. So in that case, we have to roll back. We have to remove the update that we are installing now. Earlier days, it would be very tough. Once you install the service pack, there would be no option to roll back it. But now we are a bit safe. We can uninstall the service packs. And the same way, it's not a complex one. The same way how we are installing it, it's almost the same way we uninstall the service packs, but the way is different. We need to go to the programs and features, maybe in control panel, and then you see programs. Yeah. So I hope everyone is aware of this one. If you want to uninstall any application or software from your machine, you just select the appropriate software and do uninstall. But for the updates or for the service packs, whatever being applied on your softwares, you can do that using an option called view installed updates. On left hand side, you can see view installed updates. You can click on here and it will show you all the latest updates that were applied on your softwares. You can see here the service pack 2 is being applied. It's still going on. So if you don't like, if application doesn't like the service pack, you can always come here and do an uninstallation. So it's not a bit tricky as in our olden days. I got a question from Venkat. Can we install two different versions in one machine? Yes, it is possible, but in real time, people usually doesn't go with that option. Maybe in our test servers or in our um, personal machines, yes, we can do. We can install SQL 2005, SQL 2008 R2, 2012, 2014. It is possible. But in real time, in production servers, we stick with one version in one server. Yeah, guys, this is the picture how it looks like for the extent. So this is this is a page. I hope you can see my screen. So this is the page. In each and every page inside the data file, the first will be the page header that where it reserves some space on the page. It note down the table information, and if it has got any other links, it write over there, and from then it will keep on writing data row 1, row 2, row 3, and it reserves some free space on that pages. It is because whenever the data that comes into the table, it try to push it at the bottom of this page. I can give an example why the free space has been left reserved in each and every page. Let's say I'm creating students table with 10 records, and assume this student table with 10 records were written into 2 pages, and 2 pages were 100% used. Then after uh, other users have created some 10 to 15 tables. So the first page 1, page 2 were used by students, and then after page 3 to page 20 used by other user tables, and later I came back and have inserted 2 rows in my students table. Then those 2 rows will be written in page number 22 and 23. Hope you are following me. When I create the table for the first time, the data will be stored in page 1 and page 2, and later other users were created some tables, so the next pages were reserved, and when I come back on the next day or sometime later and inserted couple of rows, those 2 rows will be written on page number 22 and 23. So here my table students was used different pages, and they are located at different locations. The data for the students were written into page 1, page 2, and then page 21. So whenever I try to read data from that table, SQL has to read page 1, page 2, and then it has to scan and all the pages to find out where are the next rows. So to avoid this thing, we always try to keep some buffer space in each and every page. So instead of filling out 100% on each and every page, what we do is we'll fill out 80% and then we go on to next page. So in that case, possibly we can't restrict all the time, but in this case, when I insert a 2 new rows in the table, at least as we have got a free space on page 1 and page 2, it somewhere accumulate the space in those 2 pages. And the next is a mixed extent and uniform extent. Mixed extent is something that a single extent is used by different objects. You can see here this extent has got table 2, table 3, and indexes. And uniform extent is nothing but it is used by single table. You can see all the pages in this extent being used by table 1. Yeah, and we are in the meantime we are done with the service pack upgrade here. So just ensure everything being succeeded, and you can close this, and now you can go back and open the Management Studio. And now you can notice the difference in the version number. Earlier it was 11.0.2660 somewhere, and now after applying the service pack you can see the number being changed. So in order to check the number, we can check the web page which I have shown you yesterday, SQL Server builds, the first link. So what the version number we are seeing now is 11.0.5058. So this is the number 11.0.5058. So it clearly says that it is SQL 2012 with SP2. Earlier it was 11.0.2100. Now it changed the version number. So by looking at the version numbers, we should be able to tell what the version it is and what the service packet got. And we have also discussed the reasons why we choose for creating a new data file, and we also So how to create a new database? The one way of creating a new database is the scripting. Write a simple command saying create database name, and the other way is using GUI. You can right click on the database and select new database, and you can just provide the database name here. I can say HDFC or HSBC. And here we are a bit familiar with the logical name, file type and file group. And the next is the initial size. What is the initial size for your MDF file? It is 4 MB. When at the back end the data files get created, right, the MDF and LDF files, so those data files will be created with the specifications. So if you want to create your MDF file with size of 10 MB, you can alter it, and at back end your MDF file will be created with the size of 10 MB. Initial size is 10 MB, but when users keep on inserting data in the database, the MDF file will grow gradually. But on what basis it has to grow? That what the auto growth settings will provide. It says by 1 MB and unlimited. That means whenever my MDF file reaches 10 MB, whenever it gets full, we are just reserving 10 MB for my MDF file. When actually user starts inserting data in this database, at some point the 10 MB will get filled off, then what the SQL Server has to do. So using these settings, it says when the 10 MB being used, increase the file size by 1 MB automatically, and up to where it's unlimited. That means it's up to the drive space. It up to the free space on the drive. So you can change it if you feel that 1 MB is very tiny. If you are inserting some loads and loads of data in this database, then 1 MB doesn't make sense. So you can change it to either percent, or you can change it to from 1 MB to 10 MB. And most of the time we won't restrict any of the sizes. It says unlimited. That means your files can grow unlimited. If you restrict it, if you say no, I want to limit my file maybe to 100 MB, then once the MDF file reaches 100 MB, then your transactions will get failed. It doesn't allow any new records to come in. So it's not a good thing unless you really required for it. So we always keep it as unlimited, because whatever the data that is coming in is a valid data and it is required for me to store in the database. And the next is the path where the MDF and LDF files were located, and the last one is the file name about your MDF and LDF files. So you're really not required to type the MDF and LDF files here. It automatically pickups. So I just provided the HSBC database name, and on left hand side, guys, I would finish within couple of minutes now. I see a question. Do we get a request for increase of auto growth? No, because users doesn't know whether the MDF or LDF file or NDF file is growing. They doesn't know about it. We need to make it unlimited so that whatever the data it is coming into the database, SQL automatically it expands its size to allow the new data. As an end user or as an application user, they doesn't know whether your MDF file is filling out or not. So these are all the objectives, and again, how these all objectives picked up. I just said create new database and have provided the HSBC name. I haven't provided any of these paths, anything here. I just provided the name, and you can see automatically all these options true, false, and simple checksum, everything being selected here. So do you remember how it got all this information? I close and reopen it again. Here, HSBC. So all these options, yes, Venkat, you are right. All these options were carried over from your model database. So now let me quickly show you here how the major, how it really reflects. So I'm creating a new database which is called HSBC. So you can just click OK. The new database got created, and in this new database, it's a fresh database, so I don't have any tables in it. Okay. So now what I do is, inside this model database, I create a sample table. So to create any table, again, it can be done in two ways. One is using GUI, graphical user interface, and the other way is writing T-SQL query. So let me show you using the GUI. You can right click on the table and do a new table, and here provide the column names. So I say ID, which is integer, and then name. The data type should be varchar. So once you provide this information, you can right click here and say save table, provide the table name. I call it as students. Then you can close it safely. Now you can refresh and find it out, the new table inside your model database. Now as this is a template, now what I'm doing is I'm creating another new database on this instance, and I call it as test DB, and I just create it. So as per our definition, whatever the properties or whatever the model database contains, it will be taken as a template for the new coming databases. So now you can expand the test DB, then go to tables. Now you can see a students table is already created, pre-created. I have just created a test DB. I haven't created any students table inside this test DB, but from where it got picked up, it is from your model database. So in real time, maybe the requirement is something like in an instance, all the databases should hold or should contain a common table, maybe logging. All the databases, irrespective of what application it belongs to, all the databases in that instance should have a table called logging. So in that case, as it is a predefined, what you can do is you can create that logging table in model. That's it. All the new coming databases will hold that information. Or else, if you won't create it in model, then you have to make sure that you create that new table whenever a new database is created. So to make our life easy, we can create the table in model and leave it. SQL automatically takes whoever creates a new database on this on this server, the table automatically get created. And we have seen about the file groups and the properties. I will just finish off by explaining this one. Whatever the properties we are seeing here, by right click on the database and going to properties, the same thing can be done with a command called sp_helpdb. Using this sp_helpdb, if you just execute this, it will give you the basic properties of all the databases on that instance. It gives the basic properties of all the databases on this instance. If you look at here, it nowhere giving information about the files, the MDF, LDF, where it hosts, it's not giving about that. But if you really want to have some in-depth information of individual database, then provide a parameter called sp underscore helpdb following with database name. Now you can execute it. It will give you in-depth details of that particular database. Now you can see here, this is a test DB, the size, owner, then the logical name, file names, file groups, everything, whatever you have seen by right-clicking on the database and going on to properties, the same thing will be listed over here. Everything will be shown. So you can use some basic commands, help db, sp underscore help db, following with database name will give you the properties of the database. Okay, I'm stopping here, and we also discussed about the file groups and the use of the file groups. And you can see here, if you don't specify anything while creating a file group, it will get created in primary, which is a default. Question from Venkat: can I install SQL Server in other machine using? Yes, you can do it if both the machines are in same domain, and if you have LAN connected to each, yes, you can do that. That's what in real time in organizations we usually work remotely. We can sit on one server and we can browse the data from a different server. Okay guys, I would like to stop here. So any questions? Nitin, Venkat. Yeah. Okay guys, thank you very much. And one more thing, I haven't checked with you. Have you installed SQL on your machine? Because you have, I mean, in order to practice all these things, creating a table and checking the files, you need the management studio with the SQL Server. And please make sure that you do two installations, one the default installation, and once you're done with that, run the setup file again, and the only change you have to give is the, instead of default instance, select named instance and give some name, and you can proceed with the installation. So please make sure that you have installed two instances. Navnita, my server agent is not installed. It should not be the case. If the installation is done, then you would get two things, database engine service and the agent service. And I can understand your issue. You might have used Express Edition instead of Evaluation Edition. You might have used Express Edition. In Express Edition, we only get database engine service and not the agent service. So could you please check what edition you are using and try to download the edition which I have provided you, the Enterprise Evaluation Edition. Okay guys, thank you very much. I'm closing the call now. Have a good day.